Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the first session of workshops at the 2024 Green Party U.S. Presidential Nominating Convention. My name is Chris Blankenhorn, and this is a grassroots organizing workshop. This workshop is going to focus on some organizing theory and strategy that, from my over a decade of involvement in the Green Party, I think is important for our local organizers. Let me share my screen real quick and I'll do real introduction. So like I said, my name is Chris Blankenhorn. I'm the secretary of the Illinois Green Party. I'm a former GPUS co-chair serving from 2016 to 2018. I've also served as the Hawkins Walker 2020 social media and tech director, and I kind of lead the education working group for the Green Socialist Organizing Project, which is where this workshop kind of originated. The Green Socialist Organizing Project, which you can find out about at greensocialist.net, is a organization that we founded out of the 2020 campaign to keep up with our organizing that we did in 2020. So yeah, this workshop, I've done organizing workshops for a number of years. I've been presenting at GPUS annual national meetings and presidential nominating conventions most years since 2016, and it's often focused on organizing. I am a former community organizer. I worked as an organizer and a field director in my hometown of Springfield, Illinois. I've also worked as a preschool teacher and presently am working in government and supporting community colleges through grant work. But I'll get started. I want to start out with some affirmations, right? Like I just said, I worked as a community organizer. I worked as a field director for a community organization. And I still have imposter syndrome, right? I still don't feel like a lot of time that I should be the one doing this work or that I'm worthy of doing this work. So we want to start with some affirmations. No one needs permission to begin organizing in their community. You can do it, right? You don't have to get permission, and this is a third party. This is kind of a uniquely important thing to keep in mind, right? There are gatekeepers in our communities, and oftentimes they're tied to the two major parties, especially if you're involved in social movement organizing and things like that, right? So you don't have to ask the permission from the people that are doing work to get involved. It's your community too. Grassroots organizing, socialism requires participatory democracy, and that's not just voting, but day-to-day engagement with our community. Good organizing is built on, first and foremost, on trust and real relationships. Working class folks rightfully don't trust politicians. Actions, not words, are what matter, right? When I worked as a community organizer, that was something I had to constantly remind people. When we're coming into a community, people have been lied to, right? For years and years, decades and decades, cycles and cycles. And so they rightfully shouldn't think Greens are any different, right? Our platforms are words. Sorry for my, I swear a little in my workshops, but words ain't shit, right? Actions are what mean something. And to do that, we have to show up in our communities. We have to build trust, right? If people are going to come in and support us, we have to put skin in the game. We have to be shoulder to shoulder next to them in their struggles. Don't let yourself get overwhelmed. It's okay and preferable to start with one or two things, right? We are in a world that's in the middle of multimodal collapse, right? We've got a climate crisis, we've got socioeconomic crises, we've got racism and bigotry left and right, we've got a rise of fascism, right? And these are just a few of them, the large nodes. There's so much to fix, and one person can't do it, right? And even one small group can't do it all. So make sure you're focused, right? Make sure we're figuring out what we want to work on. We cannot effectively do everything at once. And part of that is making sure you're doing the prep work and the planning. If we're always shooting from the hip, we're never going to be effective, right? We have to decide on measures and metrics to determine if an action was successful. And especially because this is the Green Party at a presidential nominating convention, right? There's a level of electoralism here. Winning the election isn't the only metric of win or lose, right? Did we meet more people? Are we stronger? Have we expanded our base? Have we learned some things? Have we made mistakes? And then the key part about the mistakes is, are we using those mistakes to help us grow? Right? These are the kind of metrics we need. In my state, 5% means a lot, right? If we get 5% in a US House race, that means instead of having to collect 15,000 signatures in 90 days, now 60, thanks to my wonderful Democratic governor making it even harder for us, I have to collect 750, right? That goes from an impossible task that means we never can compete because we're killing ourselves just trying to get on the ballot to a nominal number that we can easily do and we can focus on campaigning. So we've got to make sure that we're not, setting our expectations so high that we feel like we fail when we don't, achieve the impossible. We've got to make sure we're setting up the baby steps and the ladder to growth. There's no one method to organizing. Learn and adapt ideas from others. Do what makes sense to you, what makes sense to your community and your goals. Right? I'll talk a little bit in a minute about, why it's so hard to find resources on grassroots organizing. But part of it is it's grassroots. What manifests in our local communities looks different depending on where we are. What climate action looks different, right? What all these things look like manifests differently in each of our own communities, and we have to adapt to that. And like I said, there are very few resources related to independent political organizing. Most are organized towards not-for-profits and advocacy groups, which are often front groups for the major parties, right? So don't be afraid to try new things. Don't be afraid to ask for help, and don't be afraid to fail, right? When we're forging a new path, which is what we have to do. We cannot play this game better than the people who are rigging the game right now, right? It's not possible. We're forging a new path. So that means there's going to be steps forward and there's going to be steps back. It's not going to be linear. There's going to be a lot of bumps. And the question is, how do we get up from those bumps? How do we readjust? How do we recalibrate? So what is organizing, right? Organizing from the Green Party's organizing tools means engaging with society, not just thinking or talking. Organizing from the bottom up organizing is a bottom up philosophical approach to social change, not simply a method to achieve it. That's from Lee Staples, who we're going to talk about. And then one of my favorites on organizing is the key to organizing an alternative society is to organize people around what they can do and, more importantly, what they want to do. And we'll get to that later. But that was a big thing, a big part of my organizing philosophy, right? If people aren't engaged in something that makes them passionate, they're going to disengage, right? So we've got to make sure, and we'll talk about meeting people where they're at and everything, but we've got to make sure that what we're doing, it makes sense for the people who are doing it. People don't want to kind of do other people's work. They want to follow their passions. They want to utilize their skills as best they can. So this first slide, I think it's important to say we do all of these things, right? This isn't an either or debate, but I also think it's important for us to understand when we're working in our community, which of these things are we doing? And this advocacy versus mobilizing versus organizing comes from Jane McAlvey, who recently passed away, unfortunately, but from her work, No Shortcuts. But the idea and the difference is advocacy and mobilizing are directed at people who support your cause. Organizing is a strategic plan to win over those who don't, or who just don't know, right? Who aren't engaged in this kind of work. But it's important to, kind of see that internal, external thing. A lot of times the word organizing gets thrown around, especially if you're talking about, the AstroTurf not-for-profit scene of, the Democratic front groups. They talk a lot about organizing, but they're doing very little organizing. They're doing a lot of mobilizing and they're doing a lot of advocacy on your behalf, right? You're giving away your voice there. So advocacy is supporting others, such as a union or another organization like the Green Party, right? Like I said, we do all of these things. And so the Green Party would be an advocacy organization in many ways. But advocacy is supporting others to create social change on your behalf. Traditionally, this is based in the belief that an elite can influence the current system on your behalf, and that just generally does not involve ordinary people. right? So this is Move On and all those kinds of groups. Mobilizing is turning people out to protests, rallies, speaking at city council meetings, that kind of stuff. It's inward-based, building oriented. It's limited to those who already support your cause, and um, it generally results in an informal hierarchy, even in the grassroots system, that does not include many more ordinary people in decision making and leadership, right? But this is we absolutely mobilize people, right? It's a tool in our toolkit. And then organizing, right? The hard work of actively working to change the minds of those who disagree or are not engaged in your cause. Focuses on building a mass movement of ordinary people. The base is expanded through education and training, with leaders emerging organically. And one thing I'll say is that I think the Green Party, and I've been pretty deep into the beasts of the sausage making of the Green Party, but I think the Green Party sees itself as organizing, but often isn't. I would say one of my big critiques of the Green Party, and one of the reasons I work in education, I did education work with the Young Eco-Socialists, which is the youth caucus before I aged out of that, and now I do it through the Green Socialist Organizing Project. But I think the Green Party as a whole has not done a very good job of focusing on education and training. Right, we tend to we talk about a platform and broad politics, but we don't talk about how to realize those things. So I think it's important that we understand, what we're doing in any given time. Is this action advocacy, mobilizing, or organizing? Right? It's not wrong if it's not organizing. Sometimes we want to advocate on behalf of people. Sometimes we want to mobilize the people that we already know in support of a cause. But if we never get down to that bottom level of changing minds, of bringing new people in, of expanding the net, then we're never going to grow and see the success that we need. So as we start organizing, I said earlier, we've got to make sure that we're setting goals. That we got to make sure that we're strategic and we're focused. The Green Party is a low resource organization, right? We do not have the billions of dollars that the major parties do. We do not have control in government to make the laws, to create the rules of the electoral game that we're trying to play. So we really need to make sure that we're strategic, right? We need to make sure that we're focusing on things in our communities that are important. Sometimes one of the things we should think about is, where is there space for us, right? Because we don't exist alone with other political parties. There's a giant network that makes up the not-for-profit industrial complex. And there are times when you would really like to work on an issue, but it's oversaturated. It's going to be very hard to get your voice out. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't engage in that, but you need to be aware of it, right? You need to make sure that you're thinking about, okay, but how do we differentiate ourselves? In years past, I've done a lot of workshops loosely titled For an Eco-Socialist Green Party, advocating that we take a more radical and clear political stance. And one of the things I've always said in that is, if we're just a gradation more than Bernie, right? If we're just a few percentage points left of the capitalist progressive Democrats, why do we exist, right? If that's all we are, is a slight more left version without a fundamental change in policies, why do we exist? Why wouldn't we follow that inside path? But we're trying to do something different. So we've got to keep that in mind as part of our strategy. So when we're strategizing, we need to make sure we set our goals. And here's a few different things to think about. I would, these are things I think we should always kind of think about. We should go through this list on every one that we do, every action that we do. And because they're not conflicting, right? These are different authors thinking about things differently, but they're supplemental. So Miriam Kava said, questions I regularly ask myself when I'm outraged about injustice, right? So this is like, boom, we're pissed off about something, right? This is where we start. We want to act on something. So what resources exist so I can better educate myself? We got to make sure we know what we're talking about. We don't want to run in with just slogans, right? We saw that with AOC. AOC was elected running on abolish ICE, but as soon as she was in office, she voted to fund them more, right? It didn't go past a slogan. And if we can't go past a slogan, we're setting ourselves up to get our legs kicked out from under us, because any reasonable journalist, any reasonable opponent is going to say, okay, what's after that slogan? How do you realize it? What's next? So we've got to be able to go past it. So we got to make sure we're educated. Who's already doing work on this around this injustice, right? So earlier I said we've got to make sure that there's space for us, but at the same time, the other side of that coin is we need to see who our allies are, right? We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We don't have to carry all the load of ourselves. We should be building coalitions and working with others in our community. So we need to know who they are, right? We need a power map, right? Okay, this is the issue. Who's working on it? Who has influence to change things? Um, it's a big thing that I always tell people in organizing. Power map and start with you. Who do you know? Who do they know? And see where those connections lead. A common question I get is, where do I start organizing? My answer is always your neighbor, and then the neighbor on the other side of them, and the neighbor on the other side of them as your circle grows. Right? Start local. Do not go in on a white horse into a community that you think needs your help. They don't need you to advocate for them. They need to be empowered. Right? So start where you're at and expand out from there. Do I have the capacity to offer concrete support and help? Right? So sometimes we want to do something, but can we? And we should ask that question, because if we don't ask that question, we're not going to do the work effectively. And then how can I be constructive, right? What is the end goal and the path that we're seeking to take? So those are some initial questions that Miriam Kaba talked about. Lee Staples talks about what are we organizing around, right? This should be another one of those initial thoughts. Turf, right? Is it a geographical area? Is this a city council race? Is this a county issue? Who actually makes this decision? Because often I've heard people talk about, oh, we need to go to city council, and what you find out is no, that's county board, right? So you got to make sure you're thinking these things through, or we're going to misfire and we're going to look bad and it's going to hurt our credibility. Is it an issue, right? And who else? Again, who else? Then you go up. Who else is working on this issue? What unique things do we bring in? How can we educate ourselves and other people? Is it around an identity? Is it around a workplace, right? The traditional socialist organizing space. So we need to think about where we are organizing around. What is the kind of the foundation that we're working with, so that we can effectively build from there. And then Lee Staples also has, I think this is a really good thing to always ask yourself when you're doing the organizing: who wants what from whom, and how can it be accomplished, right? So who is us, right? Our membership, our structure, our staff, whoever's making this decision. In the Green Party, that tends to be local membership, right? So what do we want, right? What are our goals and our objectives? Who do we want it from? So who is actually making these decisions? Who do we need to pressure? Who do we need to make a PR problem, right? One of my favorite organizing stories was I was doing a community cleanup when I was a community organizer, and the park district was great, but public works wouldn't tell us where to put the trash. And we kept telling them, this is your trash. These are your alleys from your neglected neighborhoods. And we called and we called and we called, and they never answered. They never told us anything. And so the Thursday before our Saturday cleanup, I called one last time. And the director of public works wouldn't take my call. And so I told the secretary, okay, well, if you could please tell them we're still waiting on a place to take the trash from our community cleanup. If we don't hear anything, we'll be bringing it to City Hall on Tuesday before the city council meeting. We'll be dumping it on the sidewalk in City Hall for the press conference. I've never gotten a phone call back faster in my life, right? Within a half an hour, that man called me back because he did not want a PR problem of people from a working class district that had been abandoned by public works doing a press conference in front of City Hall before City Council meeting, and then going in and speaking. Did not want that. Made sure we were taken care of, right? So we knew who could make it, and then how do we get that? We made it a problem for him. Oftentimes, creating change is knowing who to make something a problem, right? When you're talking about local organizing in cities and things, that's often the linchpin that gets things done. So as we're planning, we need to qualify the lead, right? Who's our likely base? We should have conscious discussions and strategies about who we're talking to. We need to ask ourselves questions like, what do I care about, and how does that impact people in the community? Who are we in terms of the what communities does my core organizing group represent, right? Again, people don't need or want someone on a white horse to come save them, right? Who are we, and how can we serve our community that we represent, and how can we expand that community? So we have to start where we are. We have to grow outwards, and we have to strategize on how to become more inclusive. Um, who do we want to be represented in the organization? Oftentimes, political groups act more as advocates for others than the voices for their members. And if your membership is lacking the people you advocate for, how can we build the relationships we need to expand our reach and get those people in the room, right? And then the thing we always, I think, have to ask: who has an interest in material change, right? If someone doesn't have an interest in material change, they're going, not always, right? There are exceptions, but generally they're going to be a less enthusiastic supporter. An example that always comes to mind was I was involved in the Occupy movement, and in the winter of 2011, we were meeting in an AFSCME union hall, and I expressed discomfort about the fact that we were meeting with a giant picture of President Obama over us. And isn't that who we were protesting against? And people pushed back, and I made the statement that, many of the people that pushed back would not be with us in the spring when the presidential election kicked off. And they were very angry for me at making that statement. But come spring, do you know who wasn't in the room? Those very people, because they were no longer interested in social movement. They were going to elect their member of their party, and they abandoned us. And this has happened time and time again, right? Where often liberal or neoliberal interests advocate for something up to a point, and then they pull the rug out, right? They get the slight appeasement, and then they're willing to settle for that appeasement from the people in the community. We got to meet people where they are. So when we're going out and we're having initial, conversations, we got to remember you're going to encounter people at varying levels of engagement. People, or some people are going to like what you're doing and watch from a distance. Some people are going to hit the ground and start organizing full on, full time. You got to, kind of pump the brakes on them even to stop burnout. But most people are going to be somewhere in between, right? Because of that, you're going to need to have multiple ways to engage with your chapter, right? Not everyone is going to go out and petition, and that's okay. That's perfectly fine. And someone who's not petitioning is not less, valued than someone who is. They can still bring things to the table. We're talking about a grassroots, bottom-up movement that's, planning on toppling the world's probably strongest, political order. There's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of ways to be involved. So you got to keep that in mind, right? And that means we have to give people multiple opportunities to get involved. Business meetings are not from everyone. And that's often the primary access point for people in the party. They say, oh, come to our membership meeting this month. And someone comes to an unstructured meeting that doesn't really have a whole lot of action items out of it, and is often derailed into this debate and discussion that is, theoretical. And they never come back, right? I have struggled in this party for a long time about ways to engage people without sending them to those meetings, because I know local chapters that's their reputation as a black hole that will never see someone again, right? They're just going to go and it's going to be boring and they're never going to come back. So we severely limit our potential to engage members when that's the only access point. When we have multiple different ways to get involved, we cater to different levels of interests, have different event types, we can draw a wider group of people. Like I said earlier, people are more apt to get involved if their opportunities align with their skills and passions. When someone comes in and says, I do graphic design, you don't say, cool, can you do data entry? Right? They told you what they want to do, but this happens. And here's the thing. Managing our lists, managing our contact list is extraordinarily important, and we don't do it well enough. We need someone doing that data entry and management, but not that person, right? We got to make sure that we're doing a level of onboarding that's letting us know what people are passionate about, what issues are they interested in, and what are the skills that they bring to the table. And we have to engage them in a way that's appropriate for their level of interest, their passions, and their skill set. We need to develop a mentor system. Too many people wear too many hats in the Green Party, myself included, right? I dream of the day when I can go to a meeting as a member, right? Because I wear too many hats. Like, even when I'm not involved in a meeting, I end up getting involved in the organizing in some way or another. And part of that is a personal problem. Part of that is my inability to not engage like 100%. In 2018, when I didn't run for steering committee, that's why I didn't run. I didn't have the capacity to keep doing it at the level that I was going to, my brain was going to force me to do it. So I had to step back for the sake of my life and my family and everything else. Um, so we need a mentorship system where we're passing on knowledge, we're passing on skills, we're passing on the things that make us effective. And we have to remember that everyone's in a different phase of their evolution politically. Many people are coming in as they're changing trajectories, and this is why political education and democratic processes are really essential, because we're going to have conflict. We cannot grow without conflict, and that conflict, can kill us or it can make us better. We've got to make sure it makes us better, and that means we need transparent, democratic, and clear processes for how things work. And we've got to make sure that we're meeting people where they're at. Right? Presidential, I'll say this as I'm officially probably now an old guard, but presidential campaigns bring in people with a lot of energy, right? A lot of new energy. And oftentimes they meet people who have been there for a long time and feel like those people aren't as excited, right? But those people have probably been carrying things on their back for a long time. We're at different phases. So we've got to have that mentor program to make sure that we can, cultivate that growth in a positive way and take things off of people's backs, and then to democratize it, right? The more people involved, the more democratic it is. So when we're getting started, right, we need to grow. And when we first did so this workshop originated as part of the Green Socialist Organizing Project's 101 series. In 2022, we did 3 101 series 4 times. So we repeated it once a month, and we went Green Party 101, Organizing 101, Green Party 101, Eco Socialism 101, Organizing. And we repeated it every time, and we said, we're going to be long on purpose. We want to use these to lay the foundation for what we did in 2023, which was develop these what were originally 3-hour workshops into 1-hour workshops. And so when we started that, we put this these organizing methods in the steel industry by William Z. Foster. And we're talking about organizing methods that that came out 100 years ago. Foster was talking about this 100 years ago. And a few weeks after we, did our first workshop, in an interview, when being asked, what the organizing methodology was in these organizing the New York Amazon warehouse that succeeded in getting the union vote. And there's a lot of problems after that I'm not going to go into in terms of why they don't have a contract. But when asked what was the model that was used, William Z. Foster's Organizing the Steel Industry was one instance, right? So first off, individual recruitment, especially using a chain system for members, bring their friends and new neighbors as members, right? The fastest way to grow your local party, to grow your state party, is to have a bring a friend policy, right? Is to encourage your members to bring one new person. If we all bring one new person, we'll double every year, right? That it's that simple. Now it's not really that simple, but it's that simple, in the math. This is especially useful when recruiting organizations that are individuals in allied organizations and having mutual solidarity. Open recruitment, invite members of the public to meetings, have current members, ready to enroll people. Sometimes you can invite new folks to onboard before or after a meeting, right? But having public meetings. And one of the things that's in the lower one, but for these public meetings, one thing Foster said that I think is absolutely true is one good mass meeting is better than a dozen indifferent ones. So again, we've got to make sure that we're doing, we're being strategic about our work, when we're being effective with the limited resources we have. And then there's mass agitations, right? Slogans and publicity materials and media, making our own media, educational program, rallies, that kind of stuff. Um, these are all opportunities for us to bring new people, right? Someone sees that slogan on social media, and then now they're looking at you. So now's when it comes. What's next, right? How do we hook it? How do we pull them in more? How do we present ourselves through publicity, printed materials, radio, podcasts? We're creating our own media, um, and then educational programming is always something that will bring in broader members of the community, and it'll give us that touch and that initial conversation to hopefully bring someone in. One thing that I think is really, really key to local organizing, right? And going back to the beginning, local organizing has to be built on relationships and trust. Relationships and trust, right? Not platforms, not political promises. Long term. This is local organizing is the long game. It's what happens between elections, not the elections themselves, right? So deep canvassing. Howie, who's our room host, has always said, "Do more listening than preaching." Right? Deep canvassing is about having long, repeated conversations with community members to build trust and good relationships. Right? That's how you shift opinions. Right? No, almost no one has ever changed their mind because someone yelled at them. Right? But their neighbor that they've been talking to about this for a long time, that can shift an opinion, right? And that long-term repeated conversations is absolutely critical. Research has shown that brief door-to-door canvassing has nearly zero effect, right, on voter choices. Deep canvassing does have measurable effects in studies, though. And in one study found that just 10 minutes of conversation could have an impact on reducing transphobia, right? It's just about having that conversation with someone you trust. I know someone through my organizing that grew up in a conservative family, joined the military, and became even more conservative, lived, their early adult life as a very, very right-wing, person. And then they got out of the military and they came home and they found out that one of their closest friends came out as trans, and they were rejected by their family and they were rejected by their community. And it broke that person's worldview. It broke the person I know's worldview. Fast forward 2 years, and my governor is talking about rounding up migrants, and Trump is talking about rounding up migrants, and that person is putting out there publicly, if there are any undocumented people that need a place to hunker down, he's got them. He's got their back. He will defend. He will protect them. And that all happened because something terrible happened to someone that he trusted, that he loved. And it broke it, right? That trust and that relationship completely flipped this person's political ideology. And it's more effective than any other kind of outreach. Flyers, mailers, speeches, all that kind of thing, that one-on-one conversation, right? I often hear Greens talking about, buying buying yard signs and stuff. And there are reasons to do it, but studies show they don't actually change anyone. What they do is make it feel like your current supporters got something for their support, right? That's not to say you don't have them, but you need to be aware of what they're doing. Right? That's not a viable touch in terms of organizing and having these conversations. So some tips on deep canvassing: it's got to be more than one encounter, right? Repeated check-ins, repeated contacts. When I was a community organizer, our first contact was our canvassers. Once a canvasser identified someone that we thought was going to be good, working with us, organizers started visiting. And it wasn't just one visit, right? We visited that initial time, and we always laid out, so we inoculated them against how hard the work was going to be, and we gave them some action steps. And those were the tests, right? Where is this person? How much? But we've got to follow up, right? We can't just give the action steps and move away. And so those repeated conversations are really, really important. It means you start early, right? This is a between the elections thing. You should start focusing on this work the day after the election, right? We need to listen to concerns. We need to try to relate those concerns to our platform. One thing I often talk about in my city, people start talking about infrastructure. They'll start talking about potholes, sidewalk quality, things like that, lack of lights. Well, Do they know that in my city, the police department and the public works department ask for about the same budget every year? The police department gets 99.9% of their budget, and public works, gets 30% of the budget. And I live in the town that Sonia Massey was just killed in. In that case, it's not city, it's county officers, but that's the same thing rings true, right? Okay, so you're unhappy about this. Do you know how that connects to our city budget, right? To our local decision makers, to our local leadership. Um, and that's your job when you're out canvassing and talking to people, right? I'm a lifelong socialist. I read the manifesto at 12 and never turned back, right? But I don't go out preaching socialism to people. I go and talk to them and ask them. I help them make connections between their problems, the powers that be in our community, and the powers that be in the national and global scale, right? I let them tell me what's important to them, and I help them make connections that will hopefully over time lead to, a change in worldview. And don't put people on the spot with leader questions, with loaded questions. Um, Ask what their concerns are. Over time, you start making small asks. Hey, we've been talking about this a little while, like, would you sign this petition? Oh, sure. Hey, we've been talking about this a little while. A bunch of us going to city council tonight to, and you don't have to speak or anything. We've got people speaking, but you just want to come sit with us as a show of solidarity. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And there's another small step, right? And the next time they go, or 3 times later they go, they're like, hey, I would like to speak this time. And now they're more engaged, right? And now all of a sudden they're in your meetings that are planning the movement around this. So we've got to make these small asks, and we got to. Saul Alinsky talked about the ladders of engagement, right? Find out where people are on the ladder and try to move them up. And some people are going to stagnate on a step. That's fine. That's where they're at. That's where they're at right now. That could change or it couldn't. Some people just want to give you money. Some people aren't going to give you any money, but they'll show up at a meeting, right? Some people only show up at one kind of meeting. Some people will never show up in a meeting, but will make graphics for you all night long, right? So you got to find out where people are. Don't put them on the spot, and give them an accessible way to increase their engagement in this. Um, and Greens in other countries in Australia have used this to success, right? They made a concerted effort to say, we're going to, we're going to do deep canvassing. We're going to engage in our communities, and it's led them to electoral success. It's just a long game. Segueing perfectly into organizing in elections, there's a balance between movement organizing and electoral organizing, and it's always been a struggle for the left, or at least in modern times, it's been a struggle for the left in the United States. It's been a struggle with the left and the Green Party, or with the Green Party. The Green Party is too often taken an either or approach to this. And it's not an either or. These are, again, they're complementary, right? The movements feed into the electoral, and the electoral gives a voice and a potential for power to those movements. So we've even had splits over this. I'm not going to get into it. We do whole Green Party 101s that get into that kind of stuff. But like I said, not an either or. One of the reasons it can't be either or is electoral campaigns have a finite lifespan. They end. Your campaign will end, right? The election's over. It's over. Even if you announce you're running again, it's over, right? The cycle has ended. So it's essential for us to be able to transition supporters from volunteers in the campaign to the party, and active movement work can provide a space for that transition, right? If transitioning people to the campaign means come to our monthly meeting and that's it, it's really hard to transition people. But if you're engaged in your community, right? If you're saying, okay, the campaign's over, but we're going to keep organizing, right? Here's the educational event we do every month. We were involved in working on this issue, right? We're involved, our young Greens on the local college campus are involved in divestment. We're talking about police reform in the county. That kind of, the more of those avenues you have, the easier it is to kind of transition people. And a key element of a successful campaign is having the relationships and the trust, right? To with your community in order to have a successful campaign, right? You got to have the base. And if campaigns end and begin, it's hard to build that base, right? The party, the organization is where that relationship and trust lives, right? It's the location that allows you to have that long range, work and that long range of building those relationships and play that. So I always want to give like a model, right? I've talked about multiple streams of engagement. Like I said, not everyone wants to be at a business meeting, but they're important. Right? So it's not like I'm saying throw those out. So it's essential to have multiple ways for potential members to interact with you, both in the long-term organizing and in, with initial access. So the business meeting, this is where the operations of the party, official decision making takes place. It can be boring without proper planning and without proper planning and moderation ungainly. I've been in some terrible meetings, not just in the Green Party, and I've been in some great meetings. And I've been in meetings where people were trying to make them great, and they were terrible, and I've had ones that were just bound to be terrible, right? But that's one thing we do, and we've got to do it, right? We've got to do the work of the institutional work of keeping the party moving. And those business meetings are where democracy happens too, right? That's where we make our decisions. That's where we have our plot out our action items and steps. Have a social event, right? Green drinks, green social hour. We called it socializing with socialists in the youth caucus. Whatever you want to call it, an informal event that's intended to give people a low access point for engagement. People can discuss green politics in a relaxed setting, right? There's no pressure to join the party. You're just talking politics with someone that you might agree with. That gives us the ability again to build that relationship to say, well, we had a really good conversation. Would you like to come to number 3, our education event next week, right? Panel discussions, workshops, film screenings. Educational events allow the opportunity to collaborate with other organizations in our area. They give us access to new potential supporters that we might not otherwise access. They allow us to facilitate a common foundation in educational for education and policy in our own party, right? Murray Bookchin was very insistent that we should have like a common political core foundation, right? That's why he was big into reading and discussion groups, which can be your educational event, right? You could have an internal or an external facing political education in a reading group. And then rallies, direct action, that kind of stuff, right? Engaging in those social movements. Organize not alone. You don't have to do all this alone again. Find your allies, organize a rally, organize a protest, or some kind of public advocacy event around an issue important in your community. This can be in conjunction with the broader movements. They can help you mobilize your base, right, to show people we're showing up to you. One thing I've kind of seen in my decade with the Green Party is that often Greens are involved in their community, in the movements of their community, but they're not involved as the Greens. They're involved as Chris, right? They're involved as Howie. Actually, I'm not going to say that because Howie doesn't do this. Howie, when Howie works on and was often there as Green, he's known as Green, but often it's the individual and not the party. And when we can turn out the party to support struggles in our own communities, that shows people that we're there. And then when they see us on the ballot, they'd say, they showed up, right? They did this thing. So that's again that interconnectivity of the electoral and the movement side. But by allowing multiple access points, we widen the scope of potential members and supporters that we have access to, and it gives a wide range of things for our own members to get involved in, right? When someone has an idea, let them take the first step, right? We don't want to be doing work for people who aren't going to contribute. But when someone's got an idea they want to realize, we got to make sure we support them. Some educational event ideas coming out of Illinois. We had our DuPage County party, which is sub of the Collar County of Chicago. They had a social event. They had their business meeting. They had a monthly rally. But then their educational event for a good period of time, they did something called Hot Topics. They didn't feel that they had the capacity to organize, a full education program. So they picked a topic, Medicare for all, Green New Deal. And every month they had a public event on it. where they would have someone, give a short informational opening, and then they would, boom, go to just open discussion. And that gave a place for Greens to have these discussions, right? To put green ideas out there into people's minds because they're not being represented in the media or places like that, right? And so it was very low resources to get started, right? You just pick, and here's the thing: we can do it in a loaded way, right? We can pick issues to have these things on that play into our power, into our positions, right? Medicare for all is a great one, right? Medicare for all is overwhelmingly popular. 90+% of Democrats support it. 50% of Republicans support it, right? It's widely popular, but no one's advocating for it, right? It's been completely abandoned by the progressive flank of the Democratic Party once the Democrats came into power. We're not hearing about it. And even when we do, we're just hearing about Medicare for all. But Greens bring to the table the idea of a national health service, right? It's not just the insurance industry that's predatory. It's providers. It's any kind of profit and capital being involved in the medical system, right? And so we can elevate that conversation just by being in the room when the conversation happens. And if we host the conversation, we're guaranteed to be in the room. So we can pick things that really play to our strengths and while we're doing this, this will give our own members the chance to become more comfortable with public speaking, right? More comfortable with debate, more comfortable with the ideas that we espouse, and more educated, right? Because we're going to want to know what we're talking about if we're going to be talking on these issues. A similar idea that actually was suggested by Howie, when we were putting together some resources, was to have basically a cycling membership-led discussion rather than picking a book of political theory, right? Rather than walking behind my bookshelf and picking a book book and saying, everyone read this. We pick an article. We pick something accessible. We go choose one section of that book. But every month is a new person's turn to pick, right? So we're letting people teach it. Greens, in my experience, are well-informed activists who love to talk about their passions, right? And so that enables it. Again, they're learning how to public speak. They're learning how to educate others. They're learning how to take their passions and the complex ideas behind them and distill them into something that can be easily understood by anyone and discussed by anyone. While I am a big advocate for strong education programs, for reaching out to your local Sierra Club and saying, let's talk about, in my town, Hunter Lake, the new lake they want to build to keep fueling water to our extraordinarily dirty coal plant, right? Let's reach out to them in sustainable spring, right? Let's reach out to the local Black Lives Matter to talk about, police violence after there was a murder in town, right? I'm a big advocate for those, but they can be a little heavy on the work side, right? So the things like the hot topics and the member led, it can be completely informal, right? The member led could be public or internal. You could just do it at your meeting. So those are some ways you can have that multi-stream model, that have different levels of active engagement that someone needs to actually come and enjoy them, and also that provide a lot of different ways that when people do engage with you, they can get involved. One thing we always wanted to talk about in these, largely because my counterpart in the Green Socialist Organizing Project's 101 series was Garrett Wasserman from Pennsylvania, and Garrett is an introvert, so we always made sure to talk about these things. I call myself an introverted extrovert. As you can see, I can talk. I can talk all day, but I'm just as happy sitting at home. So here's some tips from those that are more introverted or private, not comfortable being in the spotlight, not comfortable being out in public. Make sure you're holding meetings online, right? And this is for accessibility. Anything you do should be at least recorded, if not live streamed, right? For free, you can use a service called StreamYard, and you can stream anything you want to do with a phone, right? But if the only way someone can engage with you is by being in a specific place at a specific time, you have massively reduced your reach, right? You've massively reduced it. Um, there, plus there's a whole level of, underlying classism and ableism and things like that can come in there, right? When are you holding your events, right? Is it, if it's during the day, like working class folks are working. If it's an evening, like people with families have kids, there's no perfect time that anyone can meet. So you want to make sure that you're, recording things so that people can watch them later. That you're holding your meetings, always offering a hybrid version of your meetings so that people can participate if they can't make it in person. And that could be because of, you know, because they're an introvert, because they're disabled, because they, just can't make it. They're busy at that time. And part of that is provide written feedback ahead of an in-person meeting, right? It shouldn't be that only the people there get to vote. It shouldn't be that only the people that can make it at that place and time get a voice, right? We need to provide a way for them to be informed about what they're saying. And this is about transparent democracy too, right? It's essential to a grassroots organization. We need to know what we're talking about, and we need to provide a way for people to do, be involved if they can't make it. I in the last few years became a father. We're about to have another one. My ability to make in-person meetings is extraordinarily limited right now, and it will remain that way for a few years. Um, but I always find a way to make my opinion known if I know we're talking about something. Or if I don't care, I'll shut up. But I'll usually make my way. If it's something I find important, I make sure my voice is at least recorded in the record, even if I'm not there. Um, Folks who don't want to be out in the public can. I've got 10 minutes, Howie.
Yeah, 10 minutes, and you want to have some discussion. 10 minutes, we're formally closed, but it's half hour to the next session, so people want to
And we
continue.
started late because of the problems. Yep.
Yeah,
So yeah, I'm almost done, but yeah, and then we'll open.
yeah.
But
That
people,
was a mistake, my hand going up. I just,
no worries. Um, People who don't want to be out, out petitioning, out knocking doors, out at protests and rallies, they can do that.
actually, Chris, are you still speaking from a slideshow?
Yeah,
It's not showing up on my screen for about the last 15 minutes. I don't know if other people had that problem.
I don't know.
I see it.
You
I
see
see
it?
it.
Okay, I
I
must
see
have done something. I'm an old fossil when it comes to this technology. Okay, never mind.
Yep. Yeah. So like social media, graphic design, writing of press releases, right? Data management. I said it earlier, right? Greens are terrible at data management, and we need to get better because that's how we contact people, right? There's so much behind the scenes that needs done. So that we need to make sure that we're thinking about that, right? You don't want to come to the rally. Do you want to do? Right? We have X, Y, and Z, but like, what are you interested in? When there's an in-person meeting, meet for a specific activity, not just a meeting, right? Oftentimes, one of the reasons that our meetings devolve into unstructured chaos, and chaos not in a bad, and sometimes in a bad way, but oftentimes just kind of starts drifting off into, we're just all talking about things for no reason, is because we didn't have a plan to begin with, right? So if we're gonna ask people for their time, especially as a grassroots working class party, we better respect their time. So make sure that we're doing those kind of things. And there's a few more ideas there, right, on things you can do in terms of engagement, right? Neighborhood cleanups I talked about earlier, tree plantings. In Baltimore a few years ago, they got a whole bunch of sunflower seed packets. And when they were out canvassing, they were giving people the sunflower seed packets. And from what I heard, in the neighborhoods where Greens were active, there was a noticeable increase in the number of sunflowers planted in the neighborhood. Now, did that convert people to the Green Party? No, but it shows that we talk to people, right? It's something that we see. It brings more flowers, more bee-friendly things, pollinator-friendly things to our community. Sign making party. There's going to be a rally, right? But the introverted person might not want to go to that rally, but they might show up to a sign making party where they know everybody, where they get to display their artistic skill. Have a game night, right? Do things that are not necessarily productive towards the movement to build those relationships. I was once involved in an organization where we had a rule that before you were a full member, you had to hang out with us 5 times. And that was just like a way to try to get to know you. And that 5 times could be a meeting, it could be a protest, it could be that we sent we had a signal chat and someone said, hey, I'm going to be down at the park, doing this at this time. And someone would show up. Oh, there were 4 of us in a room having a pizza, just having pizza because we ran into each other at a festival that town. That counts, right? But it was a way of vetting. It was a way of getting to know someone. And in that organization, we really cared about operational security and vetting, right? But we want to make sure that all are welcome in the movement, right? And feel that way. So consider how to make our organizations more inclusive, and especially with decision making. And to close up, I just want to do 10 things to remember about when you get started organizing, and we can have some time for talk, questions, and whatnot. You're going to make mistakes. Do your best to correct them and move on. We are going to make mistakes. We're doing things differently, and that means that we're, stepping off the ledge, and we're going to make some mistakes. Assume nothing. Follow through on everything. Check and double check. Communicate, right? Open, transparent communication is absolutely key. If you're in charge of something and you're in over your head, ask for help, right? And when you're doing work and you're organizing around, an event or some kind of program, check in with the people that you're working with. Hey, how's that going? Is there anything, I'm ahead. Is there anything we can do to take it off, to take some work off with you? And I've seen it happen over and over and over, where someone burns out and just walks away. And then everything's just left sitting on the ground, right? We're all in the pile of rubble after that impact. So we got to try to avoid that. We've got to be a community. We've got to be comrades. We've got to make sure we're checking. Make decisions. Make a damn decision, right? Don't agonize. Don't wait for a perfect solution. One of the problems with consensus is it often leads to this just agonizing, right? At some point, call a vote, right? We're not in consensus, but we're 80 to 20. We're 90 to 10, right? We got to move forward. We cannot remain in consensus purgatory. So make decisions. And some of them are going to be wrong, and that's fine. And as long as we learn from it, we shouldn't be blaming and attacking each other for those wrong decisions. And not everything any organization does has to be your thing, right? A blocking concern should be something that you are just fundamentally opposed to, not I don't like that, or I don't think that should be, that's for the discussion. But if you're blocking, you should be fundamentally opposed. It should be a hard felt opposition. Because we've got to make decisions and move forward, or we're never going to move forward, right? Campaigning is a social process. People like to be asked for help. People like to be included, and they like to be thanked. Make sure, I'm not, obviously it can be done terribly, but make sure people are appreciated. If you're not appreciated, you're going to walk and find somewhere where you are. In small races, personal will usually dominate. Issues matter more as the campaign grows, right? Remember that. Again, we're long game building relationships. We in Illinois, we had a guy run for park board. He got 5th out of 5, and the top 4 were elected. He lost by less than 100 votes. He could be in 1st next time, just by putting in those 4 years, right, of getting to know his community, of getting to be, getting to know those neighbors who didn't know to vote for him, right? And so as the race grows, issues matter more. The campaign that keeps on the offensive without being offensive is usually the most effective. Obviously, there is a level of adaptability that's required when you're campaigning, a level of fluidity when you're campaigning, but you also got to have some level of we're on the tracks, we're going this direction, right? This is what we're talking about this week. And that doesn't mean it can't be overridden, but there needs to be a damn good reason to do so, right? And look for reasons to talk about things, right? Look for reasons. don't just send an email about something. If you could, like women's rights. When was Roe passed? When there are specific dates that mean something to justify an email. Talking about, community organizing. Think about all the dates the Black Panthers have that you could look. On this date, the Black Panthers did this. Let's talk about our community, right? It's a way to open the door, as opposed to saying, let's talk about our community on this Wednesday, right? Give them something that gets them interested. All politics is local. Make sure we're translating things into local terms. Howie and I are going to do a workshop tomorrow that we're going to be talking about eco-socialist organizing, but from more of a theoretical perspective, right? Here's the theory of what eco-socialism is. Here's how it translates into policy, and here's how we make that policy local, right? Here's how we, address and adapt that policy to its local manifestations in our community. One campaign does not make or break a movement. A losing campaign can be the basis for winning next time, right? These things are steps. The only way we failed is if we didn't learn anything. This should be fun, right? I'm very torn about my love for the Yippies. But one thing I really love about the Yippies is that things should be fun, right? If we're not laughing, if we're not enjoying each other's presence, we're not going to be horribly effective. And again, look out for each other. Watch for burnout. When someone says they need help, help them. When someone, is over their head, figure out ways that you can buttress them, take things off, do what you need to do to keep that person not only involved, but valued and, functional. And then a campaign is to show this is something really important in U.S. politics, where we have a negative political culture. Most people are voting against, but a campaign is a chance to, and a movement is a chance to show who you are and what you're in favor of, right? We need to use every opportunity to show how our grassroots campaigns are different from politics as usual that we deal with the other two parties. That's all I've got. We started about 15 minutes long or late because of the issues. I am adding into the chat. I have a resource page for this workshop. It's got all kinds of different tools, guides on how to do that hot topics thing that I was talking about, right? Guides on how to do local media, guides on how to, start your own merchandise operation for your local chapter. And then another thing I'm kind of soft launching today. As I said earlier, we did with the Green Socialist Organizing Project, we did a 101 series, and it included Green Party 101, where we go through the history, the structure, the politics, and the strategy of the Green Party. We've taken that. We've done it about 7 times at this point. I've done it locally outside of that, and we've made a workshop in a box. It's got the slideshow. It's got notes. It's got template graphics that you can use to promote your own version. We hope that it has everything you need to do a Green Party 101 in the community. And I would encourage everyone to do 1 or 2 a year, right? Public facing Green Party 101. What is the Green Party? Whatever you want to call it, right? And then, but it's got everything you need to do, to go and do this workshop. And there you go. You've got an education event for the month, right? And a chance to talk about the Green Party. So, if anyone has any questions, I'm more than open, to have any questions. I see Kitten said they ran and lost, right? It happens. It happens, and as long as you grow. Orlando, yeah.
You sure you ain't from Oakland, California?
I'm not, but Howie is.
Yeah.
Long time ago.
Yeah,
I'm from deep red, rural Illinois.
Yeah, I'm from Oakland, man. How you doing, Howie? But I like how you broke this presentation down. I was looking forward, straightforward to the hip. How can we really organize? How it's not about me. How can we carry the torch? How we can move forward? Not just working just on campaigns, but networking with each other, helping someone else. I'm in California. You over here. You over here. We keep that networking base going.
yeah, and I'm going to link, and I'm dropping the slideshow in the deck right now too. Yeah, and this workshop, it's one of the, like I said, it was one of those things that I've been doing for years, right? And we really in 22 and 23 made it a focus of like starting big 3-hour workshops that no one wanted to listen to, right? And two of them are in that resources, and one is how to build a local, and one is how to revitalize a local, right? And so those are both longer form. Those are getting into an hour, 2 hours, just talking about okay, you found the Green Party, but your local's dead. What do you do? Oh, you found the Green Party, but there's nothing. How do you start, right? Because it can be too much. It can be so much. So yeah, and I will say too, I think my almost decade as a preschool teacher has really helped me. I've got a degree in political philosophy, but I worked as a Montessori preschool teacher. And so yeah, it's really lent itself to distilling, right? And thinking, but if we hadn't started with 3-hour long organizing presentations, we never would have been able to get it down concise to where it is. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I wanted to introduce myself. I know I got here late, so am I the only one from California? Earth, we're shaking the earth around here. Mother Nature's pissed off. So I wanted to share with you, I did put my letter of interest to run for president. I am a delegate, but I built community gardens, free community gardens. And so right now, I won my case against the city of Long Beach because they we have a garden up at the Michelle Obama Library. They built it in 2016. It's termite infested. And so I've invested in, I established a budding nonprofit called eLife Victory Garden Schools. I'm a retired educator. So after I survived the pandemic. So I kind of doing the research on nature deficit disorder to change the way we educate our children and to reconnect them with nature. And we're going to use the garden as the model. And this model is what I'm going to use as the platform, because as an educator, they've taken that the environmental science out of it. And so we're going to make change here. And then obviously I focus on environmental engineering. I told my daughter back in 2010, we've built several gardens in this city. And so I'm trying to save this one. And so what I told her is our next wars will be about water and food. So I want a community peace garden in each district in the city. I even spoke to the city of Compton, the mayor's office today, saying, hey, let me bring this concept to you. So at that point, I think I can introduce becoming an eco-socialist in terms of historical. I'm a historian, so we're talking about voting. I kind of want to educate them on it's time to vote. These are some ideas you may want to think. So at least working on a civic engagement here in California, in LA County, you can get, it's called the seal of civic engagement. Like a high schooler can get it on their diploma, the fact that they're involved in the community. So if we build these community gardens and they're focused on the environment, then that's going to get them thinking about outdoor jobs. So I just became a student at Long Beach City College, and we have a construction department, a horticulture. So I'm going to see how we can develop those eco-socialists and maybe open up a Green Party club at the city college. I mean, if someone else wants to work with me, I'm here. I'm ready to act. So I hope, it's been a long road, but it's time for change.
Well, and that's where, we've got to think outside the box when it comes to engagement, right? If you're passionate about gardens, get involved, right? I have a community garden right down the street from here, right? You mentioned community colleges. I work for my state community college board, and I oversee over $100 million in grants from a compliance perspective, right? But there's resources, right? If you have a college in your town, one of the most powerful things you can get is a student group, right? And I didn't have a local Green Party. I had a radical student union that I founded. We got thousands of pages of free printing, right? We had free access to rooms and space, right? There was no more, where are we going to have this speaker speak? All we had to do was put in a request, right? So, not only does engaging in youth, up your social media game, up your graphic design game, keep people who are very much materially invested in change looped in, right? The cliche of youth is, youth are the future of any movement is true, like, but it also really benefits the partner city organization, right? But we got to think outside the box, right? If it's whatever someone's involved in, right? Have an art show, have, put together a festival, whatever, the more we can uplift the work and connect it, right? There was an organization called Act Up. They were an HIV, awareness, LGBTQIA organization. They were better than anyone I've ever seen at connecting, right? Today we're at Wall Street because of HIV. Today we're at the CDC because of HIV. Today we're at Monsanto because of HIV, right? They were amazing at their ability to focus back in, right? To remember, always keep in mind, what are we doing and why? So as long as we're doing that, right? As long as we're redirecting people properly, and that's one of the big problems of movements right now. Most movements and the big name stakeholders involved are redirecting people into the Democratic Party or into the abyss, which is often the same, right? But they're redirecting people and people don't have, it's like, okay, great. But what's coming out of this, right? We had a big rally, hundreds of people came out, but what was the change at the end of it? For them, they got some signatures and they got their, local Democratic politician to speak, right? And that's the end. But for us, it's something different. We're looking for transformational change. So we've got to keep that stuff in mind, yeah.
Deborah, would you hold your flyer up to the camera, please?
Is there anybody? I see Howie's hand, but I don't know if anybody else has.
Yeah, Mark Mixon, there he is. I don't know where he's cleaning out his garage or at work or what, but you had asked if the slideshow was available, and it's in the chat now. I just wanted to make sure you knew that. And the other thing I want to say.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Howie.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to say is we should probably get off at 4:30 because the next session starts at 4:45, and those people are going to want to get organized before their session. Yep. So I think that's when we should.
And I will share in again the resource doc.
Thank you, Chris and Howie. Great presentation.
I'll look you up, Nick, when I get to Hawaii to visit my cousins. If I can get to Maui, they're on Oahu.
You've been saying that for years.
Yeah, well, COVID got in between us, so.
That's all right. I'm smiling, Howie. Thank you for everything you do.
Hey, I hold my word. I'll go to Hawaii. I won't wait. I just need a little place on the beach.
I see Mark has his hand up.
Yeah, thanks. So just real quick, Chris, is there a series of more in-depth formal organizing training that the Green Party is offering? Because I feel like organizing is a skill that we can develop, and it's something that is critically underutilized and the Green Party does not organize as I believe they should. So is there a way that we can have a series of trainings that members can participate in?
Yeah, there are. So generally I'll say no. One of my big criticisms of the Green Party is that it is not focused on education and training. And I think they're really, really cornerstone foundational things. That said, one thing I'll tell you about me is that when I burn out, which happens, it happens. When I burn out, I always revert to education. When I was in Occupy and I'm in a state capital, so we got involved in lobbying and stuff like that, and I got pissed off and I started doing teach-ins. After I left the steering committee of the Green Party of the United States and was burnt out in 2018, I dove heavily into education programming with the Youth Caucus. After the 2020 election, where I was, social media and tech director for the campaign, I dove heavy into education with the Green Socialist Organizing Project. It's always where I go. And so I just put a link in the chat, greensocialist.net/local organizing resources. And we've got a bunch of stuff there that goes, talks about specific aspects. And one of the things we have been talking about but haven't really started building yet is kind of an organizing boot camp. Here's one on this topic. It's one of those things where we have the content. We just haven't curated it together yet into a presentable form. So, those are the best I have. The Green Party's got some organizing resources on their page.
Take my number down. I'll do it. I'm retired now. I can help. I'll work with you, Mark.
But like I said, I've been doing this through the Green Socialist Organizing Project. We're a 501c4. And you can go to greensocialist.net and sign up. We have membership meetings. We have organizing spaces that we do our work in. So that's where I've been doing a lot of my education work within, in the green space. So,
Chris, does your group influence all around the country since it's a 501c4? So you're political, right?
Yeah, we're political.
So you just
primarily education, but we do put partisan advocacy because we're Greens.
All over. So if I needed you to support me on a letter, what I'm doing here in California, you'd be able to write. Okay, cool.
In California, Rick Greenblatt is a founding member with us, and he's in San Diego. So.
Okay, I'll reach out to you then. Thanks.
Yep. And it's 3:30. Thank you very much for everybody who came. Sorry for the technical issues I think we had at the beginning. And, like I said, look up those organizing resources, start doing Green Party 101s in your community, start talking to your neighbors, and play that long game. Don't get distracted by the every 2 4-year election cycles away from that long game, right? They need to complement each other, not distract. So thank you, everybody, and have a good rest of your convention. And come hear Howie and I talk about eco-socialism tomorrow.
Thank you, everyone. See you later. Let's go green.
Aloha.
Aloha.
15 minutes early tomorrow, Howie.
Yeah, 15.
And yeah, you can stop. I'll stop it.
I stopped the recording.
Okay.
So now just leave, right?
I still see recording.
Oh.
Hit the stop in the top corner.